Good morning and welcome to Mission Gathering's virtual worship service. I'm Pastor Brandon Robertson and we're so glad that you've joined us today for this virtual worship experience. If this is your first time here, we want to let you know that during this service we will be taking communion. So go ahead right now, pick up some of the elements that you want to use during that time, whether it's bagels or waffles, juice or water, whatever you have at your disposal, get that and use that during this time of symbolic unity with one another and with Christ.
So we want to also let you know that you can go on to Facebook and choose to share this service. We really want to make sure that everybody has an idea of the radical, inclusive gospel we are sharing here at Mission Gathering. So if you go on to Facebook Live and you look down at the bottom right, you're going to see that button that says share, and you will immediately start a watch party for anybody following you to join in. We also want to let you know that we have children's resources. So if you go to missiongatheringsd.org/children, you're going to find some of the best progressive Christian children's resources available out there. And this is something that obviously you can do after service and have your own Sunday school, but you can also do this throughout the week. We know that we're trying to figure out ways to fill our time. With that said, again, welcome. And we want to share from God's Word. This is Psalm 121, verses 1 through 8, and it says, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Now we're going to move into our music worship.
Worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here and moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here working in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, amending every heart. I worship you, and I worship you. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause that is who you are. And 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 that is who you are. Yes. And that is who you are, God. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. It's extravagant. It doesn't make sense. We'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable. Only heaven knows just how far you go. To say you love us, 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 to say you love us.
We know that these days are hard for so many of us that are struggling with finances because we are out of work. But in this time, for those of us who call Mission Gathering home, we still have an opportunity to give to God, who provides for us generously, so that we can continue this work of ministry here in San Diego and beyond. So we've made giving fairly easy for you in this period of social distancing. First, if you go to missiongatheringsd.org, and in the top right-hand corner of the screen, you can click Give, which will take you over to Tithely, our secure giving online. You can even set up reoccurring giving there so that it's automatically deducted from your bank account at a rate that you set on our form. We also have online giving, or texting giving, which you can give through texting a number 619-404-3314. And if you text that number any dollar amount, it will automatically be deducted from your bank account. And again, that's a secure platform to help make giving easy for you in this time. But before we take our offering, let's take a moment to pray. God, thank you that you are the good giver of gifts for us. Thank you for being a provider to us in our times of need. God, as these offerings come in and continue to come in, not just at this time, but throughout the week, we just pray that you would bless the giver, multiply the gift, and help us to continue to be your hands and feet in San Diego, online, and around the world. May these gifts be an offering to you that are pleasing in your sight, and may they be used for the furtherance of your kingdom. We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King of all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder, who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King of all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of his brilliance, the King of glory, the King of all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
So, good good morning again. My name is Wendy Holland, and I'm the associate pastor here. And I want to let you know some of the many things that we have happening here at Mission Gathering. We have transitioned all of our services, our small groups, and everything we have to offer online. The first thing we want to tell you about is our Connect card. If you go to missiongatheringsd.org/connect, you can fill out our digital Connect card, and this is how we can get you plugged into all of the community that we have happening here, and at the same time, you can tell us about who you are, any needs that you may have, and find out more about what we have going on. We also want to get you connected to a small group. We have a Tuesday night Bible study. We have a queer Bible study for young adults on Fridays. And we've got a couple of more groups coming up. One in particular is going to be a Thursday night study with Brenda. If you are interested in this, and I'm pretty sure that this is going to be kind of recovery oriented, but also for people who just want to have a stronger walk with God. Look at this on our small groups page, because it'll have information about materials that you need to buy to participate. Another new group that we're going to be adding will be led by Dr. Nancy Fowler, and this is on compassion practice, and we want you to check out this video.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nancy Fowler. Hard to say that. I am just recently able to even say that I'm graduating. My program included the compassion practice. And this is something that has helped me so much. The main part of it is self-compassion, looking inside yourself, finding things that are hurting, wounded from the past, and it helped me tremendously in dealing with my son and all of his issues, depression his entire life, addiction from middle school on. And I was able to be more calm and objective. As time went on, I got better, and it is the compassion practice that so totally helped me to be able to do this. I want to share that with you, and so I'm going to be facilitating a small group focusing on the compassion practice, and it will be Monday evenings. For a more detailed video, you can find it online on the Mission Gathering site. And I look forward to working with you, sharing more about myself and helping you to find ways to live better, be more healed, care for yourself and others. So, thank you.
The other thing that we have coming up, one of the other things that we have coming up, is on Saturday, May 9th. And this is a partnership with Raise a Child, with Koinonia Family Services, and Royal Family Kids. And this is called All Hands, a foster care information event. We want you to join us virtually, and we're going to talk about the process of fostering or adopting and other ways that you can help out this community that is in so much need. This is really an issue that is near and dear to the hearts of many of us here at Mission Gathering. So again, check that out, be part of that virtual cast, and you can be part of making a difference in these children's lives. MG Eats, you have probably seen this on our social media pages. Chef Terry is going to be preparing some delicious meals, figgy balsamic, I think either chicken or pork we're offering. We're going to have cookies included from our children's director, Lynn, and we're going to have the beverage of your choice. So you go online go onto the church website, you'll find information there, place your order, and include a donation for whatever you feel like this meal is worth to you. And we will also be delivering that meal, or you can come here and pick it up. So we're really excited about this. Finally, this is the time where you can look at that thread, see someone you know and someone you don't know, reach out, send a text, do a private message, or just say hello right there in the comments. And we are going to get ready for the message.
Life is fragile. It's a fact we're learning in real time, every day. What we once called normal has seemingly disappeared. There's uncertainty in the air, restlessness in our hearts. Things we once took for granted are becoming difficult to find. Our usual day-to-day has evolved into this odd chaos. Peace is becoming obsolete. Many have lost jobs, security, and those they love. The pain is undeniable. But what if our fragility caused us to lean harder into God? What if, in our weakness, we chose to rely more on His strength? Would our outlook change? Would the peace that passes understanding begin to drown out the noise of this moment? Would we walk in a quiet confidence, knowing our God is mighty to save? We're not promised tomorrow, but we are given a simple truth to stand on. Our God goes before us. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. Yes, life is fragile. But in our weakness, He is strong.
Well, now we're at the point in the service where we would normally move into a sermon. A couple of years ago, however, Mission Gathering in May did a series called PRISM, Faith Through Others' Eyes, where we paused sermons as usual and instead did interviews with faith leaders from various traditions here in San Diego. That series is one of my favorite memories of my time here at Mission Gathering thus far. It was such an enriching time to hear from other faith leaders' perspectives, to learn how we could be better neighbors as Christians to our siblings of other traditions. And so we're doing that series again. But because of the virtual methods that we're able to use, we can connect with people that aren't just here in San Diego, but around the country. Over the course of this series, you're going to hear from Jewish traditions, Buddhist traditions, Hindu traditions, Mormon traditions. And in order to start off the series, we wanted to do an interview with a friend of Mission Gathering, somebody who shaped our faith in a profound way here as a community over our existence for the past decade. His name is Brian McLaren. Brian's been a mentor and a friend of mine for years, has been a kind of founding patron saint of the Mission Gathering movement from our inception 12 years ago. And Brian is an incredible author, thinker, former pastor, who writes at this intersection of how to be a good neighbor and how to be a better Christian. One of Brian's books that influenced me most was called How Did Jesus, Buddha, Moses, and Muhammad Cross the Road? It's a complicated title. But that book was about how to engage as Christians in an interfaith pluralistic world. And Brian really opened my eyes and enabled me to see God in all the places I didn't expect God to be. And so, as we move into today's conversation, Pastor Wendy and I got the chance to sit down with Brian and ask him about what it means to be a Christian in a pluralistic world and how we can, in fact, show love to our neighbors while holding firm to the beliefs that are core to our faith. The reason we did this interview to start this series is because we really believe it's important that if we're going to engage with those of other beliefs and others' perspectives, and if we're going to genuinely be able to love and support them, then we are going to need to be able to name our own privilege as Christians and know about the cultural position that we get to hold as power brokers in this society. Brian talks about a lot of these concepts, and I expect that they're going to make many of us uncomfortable. They made me uncomfortable the first time I kind of stumbled on to these questions. But that discomfort, I want to encourage you to lean into. Because as we engage over the next month with these different faith leaders and perspectives, it's my hope that it's not just educational, but that we can truly listen and learn and listen for how God might be speaking through other traditions and voices where we wouldn't expect to find God based on our theology. This is going to be a time, I believe, of expanding our faith, expanding our mind, and truly helping us learn how big and beautiful and diverse our God is. So with all of that said, I'm really excited to bring you this interview between Brian McLaren, Pastor Wendy, and I as we dig into what it means to be a follower of Jesus in a pluralistic, interfaith world. Let's listen into this conversation with Brian McLaren. We're entering into this series that we do every May, where we interview faith leaders from different traditions. And I wanted to have me and Wendy get a chance to dialogue with you about your journey towards kind of being opened up to a more pluralistic way of embracing Christianity.
That's great. Well, I'm so glad you're doing this topic. It's important. And in fact, I've spent the last 6 hours at my computer working on an upcoming book, grappling with these issues again in a deeper way.
I'm excited. Yeah, you have 2 more coming out, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know how.
Well, it's a little crazy. Faith After Doubt is the next one. And then Do I Stay Christian is the one I'm working on this morning.
I love that. I love that you're working on that this morning, because I think the first question that I want to ask you is, why are you still a Christian? Why, after all of your journey of being an evangelical pastor back in Maryland, so where you're at now, how has that journey evolved, and why do you stick around with Jesus?
So those are 2 different questions, aren't they? Why do you stick around with Jesus, and why do you stay Christian? I think I think those 2 questions are in such interesting dynamic tension. I could imagine a person saying, because I love Jesus, I want to follow Jesus, I don't feel comfortable in the Christian religion. I can totally, in many, many settings, imagine that to be true. And I can imagine, the reverse being true as well. That a person says, because I love Jesus, that's why I'm going to stay Christian. So, but the first thing I'd say is, although I've probably experienced almost all the kinds of disillusionment anyone can experience about the Christian religion, my love for Jesus is as deep as ever and deeper than ever in many ways. And even though it's different, it's still deep and compelling. And it really is, it's just an accurate statement that, Jesus is kind of the North Star that I steer by. And he, it's just central to who I am. But interestingly, and of course, I'm going to take 60 to 80,000 words to answer this question in this book. One of the things I would say is, if I were to disassociate from Christianity and say, I'm too good for that religion, or I don't want to endorse that religion, I've got the problem of what other religion I endorse. And I say, well, I don't want to endorse any religion. I just want to be a human being without labels. That has a certain appeal to me. But here's the problem. Everything horrible I can say about Christianity, I can also say about humanity. In other words, our problem isn't just with Christianity. Our problem is intractable issues in the human species. And so I realize that if I'm going to stay human, maybe identifying as a Christian and working within that setting is the way I'm called to live out my humanity. So that would be a one way to answer it.
So I really resonate with that connection to Jesus. And I spent, just a little bit of background, the first 15 or 20 years of my active Christianity as a young adult, feeling like I was the anomaly and the apostate and spiritually deceived. And it was your work and Tony Campolo and Jim Wallace, like after really feeling like I was the only liberal Christian in existence in the country, realizing that there were more of us. How do we, first of all, it seems like I think we get isolated in our societies and feel like, okay, we've arrived, we're doing better. But when we look at the world, it seems like we're not. My question with that is, are we? How do we navigate that? And are we better now at making people aware of what the true call of Christianity is, or are we 10 steps back?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the language I was about to use, that language of a few steps forward and many steps back. And, obviously it's so hard to make generalizations about history, but that does seem to be the way we go in history. We take a few steps forward, and then there's a counter-revolution, and we take some steps back. But often that then sets the stage for more steps forward. In fact, one way to understand a conservative and a liberal or a progressive is to say, what one calls a step forward, the other calls a step back. um, so they're in this constant stress and constant struggle. And you might say that there are certain positive elements of the struggle. If progressives didn't have conservatives on their heel, they might take some risks and make some changes that are ill-advised and harmful. If conservatives only hunkered down all the time, they would be, stuck where they are. In fact, one way I sometimes define a conservative is a person who tries to conserve the gains made by 3 generations ago of their progressives. So, part of this is just inevitable. But I think one of the myths that all of us who identify as progressive are prone to is the idea that progress is inevitable and that progress is incremental. And I just don't think it's that way. I think progress has fits and starts. Sometimes it's gradual, sometimes it jumps, sometimes there are setbacks. And that unpredictability, when you put things in a big time frame, that unpredictability, what it does to me is it makes me not be able to be complacent. If I think, oh, everything's going to get better, in a sense, that takes me off the hook. Or if I think, oh, everything's hopeless, it takes me off the hook. But to know that my life matters with how these things turn out, that keeps me in the game.
Totally. I love that. And I think it's a good wake-up call also. Because you're right, we are prone to just think, we have our own versions of our own fundamentalism, right? Where we just think that we're leading the way and we're going to keep progressing forward.
Yeah.
And there's stuff to be learned from people in all the different levels of development and perspectives. And kind of with that, a couple years ago when we first did this series at Mission Gathering, if I was in the audience watching this happen in a Christian church, a pastor bring in a Muslim imam or a Buddhist nun, I would have been terrified. I would have thought that this was, and I actually got some emails back then saying, you're bringing in false prophets into the house of God.
Yeah.
How do you speak to people who are fearful of people of other religious perspectives, and how do you overcome that fear?
Yeah. Okay, those are 2 great questions. How do I speak to people like that? The first thing I would say to them is I would say something like this, knowing that it wouldn't work, it wouldn't help, but I think it's still maybe the most helpful thing I could say, is I'd say, look, as someone who follows Jesus, I'm called to love my neighbor as myself. And Jesus makes it clear without any question that my neighbor includes the outsider, the other, the outlier, the outcast, even the enemy. And if I love my enemy, it's probably a good idea for me to converse with my enemy. And converse means talking and listening. And so if I were in your shoes when this comes out and people feel upset about this, I might say, I'm helping you to love your neighbor by giving you a chance to listen to your neighbor in a loving way, the way you would want to be listened to. I'm not bringing this neighbor in to say, let's believe everything that neighbor believes. But I'm bringing this neighbor in for us to be hospitable, to practice Christian love, especially in a context where if I bring in my Muslim neighbor, there are many Christians who are persecuting Muslims right now. If I bring in my Jewish neighbor, every Jewish mother in America wakes up knowing that there are white Christian nationalists who will make put her child's life and freedom and well-being at risk. So as an act of love, if I don't listen, what's wrong with me? So that would be the place I would start. I know that wouldn't solve all the problems. And if we were to get to what the deeper problems are, Wendy and Brandon, I think the deeper problems are a problem in Christian theology. And here's the way I would say it. Christian theology, long ago, embraced an idea that I think is anti-Christian. It's anti-Christ. It is Christian in the sense that Christians have held it for half of our history, at least. But it's what I would call Christian supremacy. We all know about white supremacy. Well, in some ways, it's hard to tell which is the chicken and which is the egg. White supremacy and Christian supremacy are very, very deeply fused because they both have their origin in Europe. But what I realized, in fact, as I was writing this book on doubt, I got into the book and I had an aha moment. And I didn't even mention this till the end of the book because I didn't want to go back and sort of spoil the surprise. But as I finished the book, I realized my path of doubt was trying to get me to the point where I doubted supremacy. I doubted the idea of supremacy. And when I think of all the pain that I've gone through in that doubt process and all that I've lost, the gain of losing supremacy is the greatest gain of all. I would never want to hold supremacy anymore. It's just not something I want. And of course, as soon as I say that, I think of Philippians 2, that whole message about Jesus imaging God, not by grasping at supremacy, but by pouring out supremacy in loving service. So I think that's our deeper problem. It's this sense that Christianity and supremacy have been fused together. And that is deeply, deeply dangerous.
And so damn, could go in 10 different directions with questions I have connected to that fear that perpetrates and how damaging this is to especially people in our community. I mean, we are always countering this rhetoric of you're not good enough, God doesn't approve of you, God doesn't love you, and then the damage that so many people that we know are still living with, even in that moment, like you said, of realizing the grace that we experience through Jesus, that we still can't internalize that. So kind of connected to that in your book that Brandon was talking about, like, why did the prophets cross the road? You were talking about your exposure growing up to revisionist history.
Yes.
And we are seeing that more than ever right now. I've kind of done some homeschool co-oping with my kids who are now older teenagers, and realizing that not just Christian curriculum, but in red states, the way that we are intentionally perpetrating that fear and that revisionist history through textbooks. And this comes from Christianity. This comes from that white supremacist Christianity that puts so many people in danger. Do we try and just counter propaganda, or do we engage in activism to shut this down? What does that look like?
Yeah. So this is really, it's so funny you say this, Wendy, because I'm not proud of this. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed, but it's the truth. In all the years my kids were little, I never went to a school board meeting. I was just too busy. I guess when you're a parent, you're busy. Plus, I was a pastor. I wish I had gone to school board meetings, but I never did. But then 11 years ago, I moved down here to Florida. And the local school board was throwing out a textbook because they felt it was unfair to the Texas Rangers. Now, if you know the history of the Texas Rangers, you know, you could describe some of their activities as white terrorist activities against brown Mexicans. And so I decided I've got to show up, and I joined a protest. And it was also, you know, protesting science and stuff like that. I mean, these textbooks, the school board was being asked to throw out textbooks that just had good science in them, you know. So good history and good science, we've got to throw that out. And so this is the struggle. But here's the interesting thing, that because of our Christian background, we know at the end of the day, the world changes when beliefs change. So struggles over beliefs, when we're struggling to challenge beliefs, it's not just an esoteric waste of time. It actually is where change happens. And let me maybe give two examples, one positive and one negative. When I was a boy, I grew up during the civil rights era. And in the 1960s, progressives in this country, led by Dr. King and other Black leaders, succeeded in changing the laws. But we didn't change the beliefs of an awful lot of white people. And so as a result, even though we changed the laws, the beliefs have gone unchallenged. Now, I still think we did the right thing to change the laws, If we could go back in time, knowing what we now know, what should have happened is the churches of America should have gotten together and say, let's get the white Baptists and the black Baptists to have dinner in each other's homes. And let's get the white Presbyterians and the black, that we could have used our religious traditions to help build relationships to break down those false beliefs. Because false beliefs, prejudice beliefs, only remain when you don't have actual personal contact, right? So there's an example where I think we missed the boat, and we still have that work to do. And thank God we're still involved with it. We're still fighting that fight. But what's interesting to me is in the LGBTQ issue, that battle happened, and the laws were changed about marriage, for example, and in many places for discrimination. But simultaneously, a really effective campaign went on through the media, through the arts, through a coming out, a whole sort of protocol for coming out, where now almost any American who has had at least one friend or family member come out to them, their beliefs begin to change over time. And by the time it's 2 or 3 or 7, you can almost guarantee their beliefs will start to change. And this is our challenge. And this is, so what I would say is the political battles, they're important. I don't think it's one comes before the other. It's system change, and system change requires both kind of the public struggle and the relational struggle. Does that make sense? And that applies to prejudice against Muslims, prejudice against Jews, atheists, Hindus, Wiccans, whatever it might be.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's super helpful. And I think I'm grateful for communities like the communities that Mission Gathering is associated with that are working in very real ways to try to figure out how to actually defend truth, which sounds so weird to say it's not typical language we might use from a progressive perspective, but to help people see beyond our biases and stereotypes is, I think, one of our fundamental Christian calls. I mean, it is what you were talking about, loving our neighbor as ourselves.
Yes.
And one of the things, so I feel like every conversation with you is, for me, going back to memories of places where you've intersected with my faith journey. And a few years ago, while I was still at Moody, I came out and saw you and Ibu Patel at Catholic Theological Society giving a talk. It was my first time really having an interfaith experience, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And one of the things that was brought up in that conversation was among progressives, there's this idea of kind of being cafeteria-like with our spirituality, going around and saying, I like a little of this Buddhist, I like a little of this Jewish tradition, I like a little of this Christianity. And for the first time in that conversation, there was a tension elevated about whether that's actually a good or negative thing to have. So the question I want to ask is, one, is that good or negative when we go around and take from other traditions and create our own spirituality? And two, how has your own Christian faith been influenced by other religious traditions?
Oh, man. Okay. So what good questions. So the first thing I'd say, that first question is so interesting and so complex. The fact is, no matter what we say, religions are always interacting and borrowing things from each other. I remember I wrote a book, one of my least read books, but maybe I have a special place in my heart for it for that reason, kind of like your kid that gets bullied on the playground. But I wrote a book called The Last Word and the Word After That, which is about hell. And I remember what a shock it was to me as a preacher when I realized that nowhere in the Hebrew Scriptures do you find hell, what we think is the biblical concept of hell. And that, in fact, in most of the Hebrew Scriptures, in fact, I would say in all of the Hebrew Scriptures, there is no substantial afterlife, like a heaven and hell kind of afterlife. And so where did that come from? Well, the Jews got it from other sources. Most likely, although we can't know for sure, they got it from Zoroastrianism through the Persians. In fact, there's even one theory that says the word Pharisee is actually the word Parsi, which means the word Farsi or Persian, and that these were Jews who were influenced by Persian ideas. Now, there's another theory of the meaning of that word too. Um, or maybe the Jews got that idea of hell from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. That obviously had association with the Egyptians. But the point is, they resisted that belief, even though all their neighbors believed in an afterlife. They resisted it for centuries. And most Jews today still do not believe necessarily in an afterlife. So religions are always exchanging ideas. The Christian idea of the Trinity. I believe in the Trinity. I love the Trinity. I think it's a beautiful teaching, properly understood, even though it's been used in super harmful ways. When the Trinity is defined, people use words like hypostatic union and persons, in a very technical sense. What they're doing is they're borrowing categories from Greek philosophy that were big debates in the early church in the 4th and 5th centuries. So we're always interacting. We're always permeable. That's just a historical fact. But here is a problem. It's not a problem that counteracts the first thing, but it's just something we have to hold a both and in dynamic tension. The great theologian John Cobb, Methodist process theologian, I just love John Cobb. And John Cobb is one of the world's greatest Christian scholars on Buddhism. And John makes this statement. He says the major world religions are incommensurable. And here's what he means. They aren't saying the same thing about the same thing, and they aren't saying different things about the same thing. They're saying different things about different things. In other words, like they're like different research projects, and they interact with each other. They have a lot of interesting things to talk about. But, psychology and physics have things in common, but they're looking at different challenges, right? And I think if we can understand our world religions in that way, I think we're paying them proper respect. Each in their history, they have arisen out of a different set of problems, a different set of challenges. And to appreciate them, we need to understand them as their own entities in their own context. But here we are now. And just because I'm a physicist doesn't mean I'm not interested in what I can learn from a psychologist. And if I'm a psychologist, there's a lot I can gain from a physicist. And that's how I feel we are in this moment, that we have a lot to learn from each other. The Dalai Lama, I think, I think he captures this well when he basically says, look, whatever you are, be the best version of that you can be. And one dimension of the best version of that is that you learn from other traditions as well. And that, I think, is pretty simple and good and wise advice.
So I realize you have written entire books on this, what I'm about to ask, but given all of that, the freedom to incorporate different faith systems and just how God works in our universe, what does your own personal faith look like right now? And I think that's so important. It kind of gives us all permission to define who we are personally. We all have individual relationships with God.
Yes.
So from the perspective of original sin and election and eternity, and I'm really curious.
So let me say first that I have deconstructed the doctrines I inherited, and I haven't done that as an act of malice. I've done that as an act of love. I've really wanted to understand these doctrines. What do they mean? How did they arise? How did they develop? What uses were they put to? And so each of them I've had to, in a sense, take apart, and then to the degree that I've reappropriated them in a way that I don't feel is harmful, that I hope is helpful and healing and true and good. So maybe let me give an example of a Christian doctrine that I've radically rethought. And then maybe I could give an example because I don't think Brandon, I answered that's part of Brandon's question. What's an idea from another religion that has been helpful to me as a Christian? So let me take the doctrine of the Trinity, which is not, in the Bible, although people use the Bible to defend it. It's a doctrine that arises in Christian history for very understandable reasons. Jesus constantly talks about the Father, and Jesus says that he and the Father are one, and Jesus talks about the Spirit. So we have these three names. How do we talk about their relationship? What I've come to see in the 4th and 5th centuries is that the early church was trying to be faithful to Jesus' teaching in the context of Greek philosophical categories and with the Roman Empire breathing down its throat, because the bishops had made a deal with the Roman Empire. And I think, especially there's a group called the Cappadocian Fathers, they preserved something that I think is truly revolutionary. And here's how I would sum it up. And this is very similar. In fact, it's identical to what Richard Rohr says in his book on the Trinity called The Divine Dance. But I love the doctrine of the Trinity because I don't hold it in a way to say, if you're Jewish and you don't believe the Trinity, you're going to hell. To me, that's ridiculous, right? I don't even think in those terms anymore. But the reason I cherish and meditate on and love the doctrine of the Trinity is because, first of all, it takes the idea of an absolute monarch and it deconstructs that idea. So many people want to see the universe as a pyramid with one, it's like on the dollar bill, a seeing eye on top who controls everyone else. And it's sort of the way our economic structure is designed, with the 1% at top, and the 90%, 99% with crappy healthcare and fewer rights. And no, this says no. That monarchical view of the universe isn't right. The essence of God is not domination of one over others. Father, Son, Spirit is a relationship. It's not domination, it's relation. Not only that, but what's to me just powerfully subversive is that the early church fathers, when they talked about the doctrine of the Trinity, they said the Father doesn't dominate over the Son. Now, there's no more dominant relationship in a patriarchy than father over son, but Father and Son are co-equal. That's a remarkable statement that everybody who learns about the Trinity learns, but we don't realize how revolutionary it is. This is getting rid of domination. So it's not like chain of command. The Father and the Son tell the Spirit what to do. No, Father, Son, Spirit says that God is dynamic. God is relational. God is non-patriarchal, ironically, non-hierarchical. And that to me is a beautiful, it feeds into what a lot of people call process theology, that there's actually a life of God. So that to me is very powerful. Let me give one quick example of a doctrine. Let me take one from Buddhism. And first, I can tell you, like right now, as we have this conversation, we're at the beginning of the season of Ramadan, a Muslim season of reflection and prayer and fasting. And some years ago, I won't go into the whole story here, but I have some Muslim friends, and I felt moved in my heart that I would try to participate in the Muslim fast month of Ramadan. So that means you don't eat between sunrise and sunset. Well, I have to admit, I was a little fuzzy on sunrise and sunset, but I for that month joined in that process, and it was a deeply meaningful process, just as a spiritual practice. And I'm thankful, and in fact, every Ramadan that comes, I feel a little sorry that I'm not doing it again, and maybe someday I will. But there's a Buddhist idea. It's called the principle of no independent origination. And the basic idea of this Buddhist principle is that when the conditions are right, something can happen. And when the conditions are not right, something cannot happen. That everything that happens is connected to every other thing, because we're all in this web of events and connections. Well, that idea I was introduced to as a terrible idea because it said that miracles aren't possible, and because in the framework of Christian understanding that I inherited, miracles involved something happening with no cause. And now I came to see, you know what, I don't have to define miracle that way. and in fact, this principle from Buddhism has helped me. In many ways, it's the essence of what we now call systems theory or systems thinking. And I'm so grateful for the insight that came to me as I grappled with the tension between a Christian and Buddhist idea, and some light flashed for me from the Buddhist idea.
Totally. Wow, so much there, but I'm grateful for it all. And kind of as we come to land the plane, I think one question that is interesting that I'm thinking about as you speak is, I know that currently you're involved, both obviously still writing about faith, and of course a truck drives by right now, but it's okay. So you're involved in this faith world, you've been involved in this faith world, but you're also starting to engage politically, you've been engaged politically, but now vote common good. And this is a critical moment for all of us to be engaged as people of faith in this political process. I wonder how, from an interfaith perspective, what is the importance of the average Christian in our congregation here at Mission Gathering engaging in the political process on behalf of our interfaith neighbors? If that question makes sense,
Yes,
what is the utility
sense
there?
Yeah. So let's flip it around for a minute. Let's imagine that we were Jews in Israel and we were occupying Palestine. At that moment, to be a good Jew would mean you would vote not only for yourself, but for the interest of your neighbor. So you would be an Israeli citizen who voted with a concern for the well-being of your Palestinian fellow citizens or neighbors. You can imagine yourself being in Burma or Myanmar, Buddhist majority, Muslim minority. To be a good Buddhist would mean you would vote with the concerns of your Muslim, the Rohingya people, as a concern that you shared. You wouldn't want your vote to hurt a religious minority. Well, come back to the United States. If you're a Christian, especially if you're a white Christian, and you only vote for what makes sense to you as a white Christian, I can pretty much guarantee that you're a bad Christian. Because a good Christian would not vote for his self-interest, but would also be concerned with the interests of others. That's what it says in Philippians chapter 2, if you want a Bible verse for it. It's really worth reading. So that means that, in fact, I just yesterday was on a phone call with a rabbi and a Jewish activist who were basically saying, what can we do to get a message through to evangelicals that if they vote for white nationalists, they're putting us and our children at great risk? They think, they buy this propaganda that if they support certain candidates, they're supporting the state of Israel. But they don't realize those people are using the state of Israel to boost a white Christian nationalism that is right under the paint, is anti-Semitic as they come. So this is where, again, if we never listen to our neighbors, if we only encounter them to preach at them, or if we avoid them, we never listen to them. We don't know what their interests are. We don't hear their fears. And we cannot be good Christians if we don't listen from our hearts to the hearts of our neighbors of other faiths.
That's so powerful. And I do hope for our community watching this right now, that's the call that I feel like we're being called into in this series in particular, to listen, to learn, and then to not just allow this to be for our own spiritual nourishment, although it is, but to actually take this good news, this pluralism, this bigger way of seeing the world and creating justice to our neighbors. So Brian, I want to thank you so much for taking time to be with us this morning. And as always, so inspiring, so helpful, and we're just grateful.
I want to say it was all I could do not to give you a standing ovation. Those last comments, that's so important. And I also want to say thank you for the permission to engage other faith practices. That's such a beautiful and unifying thing. And I can't believe that we're not basis.
Yeah, I didn't get to mention that one of the other problems, especially for white people, is that we're famous for something called appropriation. And we don't want to appropriate in ways that's why I think anything that we embrace we should first, whenever possible, do it in consultation with our neighbors of that other faith. And we should understand it deeply enough that we're not just appropriating it. And of course, that's what we would want, as doing unto others as we would want them to do for us. I want to share every treasure I can of my faith with other people. But I don't want them to just sort of put their brand on it. I want there to be a real meaningful exchange. And can I just say thanks to you guys, and God bless Mission Gathering for doing a series like this. It can make people uncomfortable, but a whole lot depends on it. A whole lot depends on it. So keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. And go enjoy that Florida weather as we're doing here in San Diego. So
Blessings to you both.
We'll see you, Brian.
Good
Thank you.
talking with you.
We're now at the point in our service where we're going to move into communion. I always say that communion is one of my favorite times in our worship service because it embodies and symbolizes everything we're about and what we believe as followers of Jesus. As we come to this table, we want you to know that everyone is welcome to participate. No matter what your age, your race, your sexuality, your gender identity, what you believe or what you've done, where you've been or who you are, God has welcomed each and every one of us to come to this table and to receive these symbols of His grace. As Jesus was coming to the end